Over the past few weeks, we have been learning the most amazing and probably the most famous story of all of Jewish history. And of course, I'm talking about the story of the Jews coming out of Egypt. And we all know the basic story. We're going to tell it in a few weeks at our Seder, right? At our Passover Seder. And we were slaves in Egypt. And then Moses came and there were the 10 plagues. And then we got taken out of Egypt, led by Moses. But we hit the sea. And then the sea split. And the Jews passed through the sea. And after they passed through, the Egyptians followed, and the water closed up around the Egyptians, and they all drowned. And with the Jews safe on the other side, it says, Az Yeshir Moshe, the Jews, led by Moses, sang a song of gratitude to God. But then, if you look in the Torah, the strangest thing happens, and I'm going to read it to you. It says, Vatikach Miriam Hanaviyah, and Miriam the prophetess took. Miriam Hanaviyah, Miriam the prophetess? Why does it call her Miriam the prophetess? Yes, she was a prophetess, but Abraham was also a prophet, and they don't call him Abraham Hanavi, and Isaac, Yitzchak was a prophet, and the Torah doesn't call him Yitzchak Hanavi, Yitzchak the prophet. So why does the Torah address her as Miriam the prophetess? Let's continue. Which Miriam? Achos, the sister of, go ahead, finish the sentence, the sister of 99% of the people would say Moses, right? But that's not what it says. It says the sister, Achos Aharon, the sister of Aharon. When you're talking about somebody and you want to say who this person was, wouldn't it make more sense to say that she was the sister of the more famous brother, Moses, who just took everybody out of Egypt? Why does it describe her as Achos Aharon? And what did she take? Es hatof biyada. She took the tambourine. The tambourine? She didn't take a tambourine. The tambourine? Which tambourine? Did I miss something? Do I need to turn back a few pages and see which tambourine? Did they talk about a tambourine? I don't think so. And all of the women followed her, and they were all singing and dancing with their tambourines. They all happened to have tambourines. Was that like the number one thing on their list to pack when they were leaving Egypt? How did they all have tambourines? So in order to answer this question, and actually a few more, why did Miriam need to sing her own song anyway? Was she a feminist? She said, oh, the women need to sing their own song different than the men? I don't think so. And if the Torah records for us these specific words and tells us that she sang her own song, that means that there's something that we're supposed to learn from this that ultimately is going to enhance our lives. So to answer the questions, we need to go back in time, and we need to learn a little bit about Miriam and her life. In Judaism, a person's name is a little bit of prophecy. It actually tells a little bit about their lives. She was named Miriam. What does Miriam mean? Miriam comes from the shor, from the root word mar, which means bitter. Think about those bitter herbs, maror, that we eat, the maror on the Pesach Seder. So she was born into a bitter and a dark time, and that's why she was named Miriam. And if I'm successful today, I'm going to bring you back in time to not only hear about her life during that dark time, but maybe to experience it a little bit through her eyes. So we tend to think all's well that ends well. The Jews were slaves in Egypt, but then we got out and then we were saved and everything is okay. How many of us take the time to stop and think what life was like for the Jews in Egypt at that time? Have you been to Yad Vashem? Have you heard the testimonies of the people who survived the Holocaust and what kind of torture they went through? How barbaric the Germans were? The reality is that the Jews who lived in Egypt as slaves were also tortured by these Egyptians. The Egyptians themselves were barbaric people. Sometimes people say, why didn't the Jews in Germany get out? If things were getting bad, why didn't they see the writing on the wall? And the answer is, because it happened so slowly. It evolved over time. It devolved over time. First, it got a little bit bad. And people said, okay, this is bad, but it's not so bad. It's no reason to leave. I have my business, I have my family, uproot my family, I don't know where I would go. And then it got a little bit worse. Okay, nobody anticipated that it was going to get worse, but it did. And then little by little, until it was too late for them to do anything, and they couldn't get out any longer. We're going to learn a similar thing happened. Let's go back in time. Let's go back to Egypt and say, how did it happen that they became slaves? So we know that Abraham had a son, Isaac, Yitzchak, and we know that Yitzchak had Yaakov, and Yaakov had 12 sons. And Yosef, his son, was in Egypt as the viceroy. He was the one who saved everyone during the famine. And Yaakov and his 11 sons went down to Egypt to get food during this famine. And when they lived in Egypt, they were specifically given the city of Goshen, a secluded place where the Jews could be, where they wouldn't be influenced by the people around them, by the Egyptians. And things were relatively okay for the Jews at the beginning. Certainly for the first 17 years when Yaakov was alive, things were okay. For the next 58 years, Yosef was still alive, and he was the viceroy, so people were nice to the Jews. And even until the last brother died, Levi, which was 22 years after Yosef died, things were pretty okay. And during this time, the Jews were very successful. The Jews prospered. As a matter of fact, they were multiplying so much, there was such a population explosion, that they couldn't fit in Goshen anymore, and they had to actually start moving into the outskirts of Goshen, into the cities surrounding Goshen. They were also very successful. And because there's nothing new under the sun, and history tends to repeat itself, whenever the Jews are successful, anti-Semitism raises its ugly head as usual. And that's what happened. Oh, the Jews, they're so refined. They think that they're better than us, don't they? And do you see how many children they're having? Twins and triplets. They're going to overrun this country. They're going to take over. We have to do something about this. So the Egyptians mobilized and they decided to approach the king. It says in the Torah that a new king arose. Was it really a new king? Actually, when these people approached the king and they said to him, these Jews, there's a Jewish problem here. We've got to do something about this problem. The king started initially to defend the Jews. What do you mean? They're so good to us. Yosef is the one who saved us. Don't you remember him? And basically they said to him, Paro, you have a choice. Either you do something about this Jewish problem that we have, or we're going to find a king who will. And so he had to start changing his tune. Vayakam melech hadash, a new king with a new attitude came into power. And he called his advisors and he said, what are we going to do about this Jewish problem? And they actually devised a meticulous plan how they were going to eliminate the Jews. But they didn't start out saying we're going to eliminate the Jews. They started out saying we're going to create a workforce. They came up with these things called the labor laws. What the labor laws did is originally it raised the taxes, and it raised the taxes, and it kept raising the taxes until nobody could afford those taxes. So then the government had a great plan. That's okay. If you can't afford the taxes, what we're going to do is we're going to come up with these workforce type of programs. You can sign up and you will work and you'll get paid. You'll get handsomely paid. Not only that, it's going to be a lot of construction work. So you can actually build yourself a house as part of your job and you can keep the house because we hear you're having a population explosion. You need a bigger house. So this made sense. So the Jews en masse decided to sign up for this fantastic program. I work, I get paid well, I can pay my taxes, I get a new house. It's a good deal all around. Even the Egyptians signed up because it was a good deal for everybody. And so they started to work. And it's even told to us that Paro himself, the king, came down and he worked alongside them one day. And what do you do if the king is working alongside you, right? You want to work really, really hard. You want to show that you can do a really good job. You want to impress the king. So what happened was, even though usually I produced 78 bricks on a regular day, today, because of the king, I'm working so hard, I just want to show him I'm going to produce 100 bricks. And you know what? The next day, 100 bricks became the quota. Oh, I see you can produce 100 bricks. So that's now what you need to do if you want to stay a part of the program. And of course, I do want to stay a part of this program. This is a great program. Only over time, the Jews started to look around. Anybody notice that it's only Jews here? We're all the Egyptians. Didn't they sign up? They were working alongside us in the beginning. And they noticed that all the Egyptians were promoted to be the headmasters, the taskmasters. And the Jews were the ones doing the menial labor. And then eventually they said, you know what? If you don't meet your quota of bricks, you're not going to get any of the benefits anymore. So they lost their benefits. And then over time, they said, you know what? If you don't meet your quota of bricks every day, we're going to beat you. Legally, that's going to be allowed. Okay, so they're thinking to themselves, well, there are 100 of us to one Egyptian taskmaster. I mean, chances are that the Egyptian is probably not going to notice how many bricks each one of us are going to make. So it's not so bad, except, do you know how in Germany they set it up so that there were capos, so that one Jew was in charge of a whole bunch of other Jews? Well, they set up the same system here. So basically, if you had 10 Jews that were monitored by one Jewish capo, so to speak, you only needed one Egyptian for 100 Jews. And if any one of the Jews didn't meet their quota, the capo in charge of them was punished. Sound familiar? So this work program that started out as, it's a great idea. You work is going to get you money. Work is going to make you successful. Work will save the day and you'll get paid and you'll be able to pay your taxes. In the end, this workforce actually turned into slavery. I'm a little bit reminded of that slogan that they had over Auschwitz, right? Work will set you free. That same kind of a concept. And new edicts kept coming. Little by little, the Jews started to be viewed as subhuman. For example, these labor laws where they were working turned into labor camps where they weren't allowed to go home. They could only go home once every 2 weeks. And over time, they started to get assigned menial tasks. It was legal to assign a Jew walking anywhere a menial task. Do you have those pictures in your head of those Germans who would ask the Jews to bend down and shine their boots on the street? That was considered legal. Well, the Egyptians did something similar. Technically, legally, you could stop any Jew on the street and you could tell him to clean up the dung from your sheep. Jews were considered subhuman. You could do anything you wanted. And that devolved further into a sport. Let's have fun. Let's send the Jews to capture some wild animals. What's the worst that can happen? We'll have fun watching them get torn apart by a wild animal, or maybe we'll have a new wild animal as a pet. And then over time, the Jews were hoarded back into Goshen, into a ghetto, where it was just not possible for them to fit, and the conditions were terrible in which they lived. But the plan was not working. The idea was to work them and work them and work them until eventually they were going to maybe die out, or they couldn't multiply, or they wouldn't be successful. But the reality is that they were still multiplying. They were still having twins and triplets. So we needed another plan. So Paro called his advisors together again, and they said, well, actually, we look in the stars. What we're seeing is that a Jewish boy is going to ascend the throne and be their savior. So we need to do something about getting rid of those Jewish boys. I know. We'll kill the babies. But we can't say that. People will think we're a barbaric nation, and we don't want people to think that we are a barbaric nation. Does that sound a little bit familiar? Did you read the stories about how they'd have people playing violins at the beginning, at the entranceways of the different concentration camps? So when the Red Cross came, they would say, oh, they're playing violins. How bad could it be? Oh, no, it's just a work camp. And the showers? Yeah, showers. We let them shower every day, but we all know what was going on in those showers. So this was a plan to get rid of the Jews, to get rid of the boys specifically so they wouldn't multiply, to get rid of the boys because this way no boy would rise into power. We've gotten used to these slaves. We like having these Jews to push around. The sport of having them get those wild animals is a little bit fun. So if we get rid of the boys, right, then we don't have to worry about them multiplying. We don't have to worry that anybody's going to rise up into power and take away our slaves. And not to mention, if we get rid of the boys, then we have all the girls for ourselves that we can plunder. But since we can't say it out loud and we don't want to appear to be barbaric, what can we do? I know. What they did is they called in the midwives, the Jewish midwives, Yocheved and her daughter Miriam, little Miriam, who's still a child. And they said, we've just passed a new law. And the law is that any time a little boy is born to the Jews, you're going to have to suffocate, and some say maybe break the neck of the boy, and then just tell the mother that it was a stillborn. This way, no one will be any the wiser. We'll get rid of the boy population, and they'll stop multiplying, and we'll be solved of the whole Jewish problem. It'll be gone. And what do you think Yocheved and Miriam did? Well, of course, they walked out of there and they weren't going to do it. So they didn't. And time passed, and Paro calls Yocheved back to his chambers and says, excuse me, did you not understand what I said? I mean, I'm looking at the paper every day, and I'm not seeing that the rate of stillborns is going up, so you're not doing what I said. To which Yocheved replied, no, you don't understand. Of course we would want to do what you want. But we can't, because these Jews, they're having babies so quickly, twins, triplets, quadruplets. By the time we get there, the baby's already born. So we can't say that they're stillborn because they hear their babies crying. So there's really nothing we can do. Plan C, since plan B didn't work. So now Paro calls his advisors together and says, now what are we going to do? And they say, well, we're going to look in the stars. You know what we see? We see that this boy that's supposed to save the Jews and lead them out of slavery, we see that he's going to meet his doom by water. The reason they saw that is because we all know that Moshe, in the end, was punished because he hit the rock when the Jews wanted water. So it was related to water. So I know we're going to drown all of the new baby boys. This way we don't have to worry. Whoever is going to be born will drown all the boys, and this baby will drown also, and no boy will save the Jews. But we can't say that. We can't let the people think that we're barbaric, that we are going to be drowning babies. That's awful. I know. We're going to leave the babies on the shore. And when the tide comes in, well, the babies were swept out into the sea. And slowly over time, because propaganda is such an incredibly dangerous weapon that people can use. Over time, what happened is that people started to think of the Jews in such a subhuman way that they started to make it into a sport. Who could take the baby that's on the shore and throw them further into the water? Kids were actually excused from school to go on baby hunts to find the babies that they were hiding so that they can throw them into the water. It also, you got rewarded, it seems, if you ever saw a Jewish woman walking in the street and you recorded that and you figured out, okay, she's pregnant now, let's see when her due date is going to be. They kept those records so they would know who was due to have a baby. Then they know when to go and try and find that baby, even if the mother was trying to hide that baby. Well, I know you were pregnant, so I know you had a baby, and they would find the babies. Do you remember those stories from the Holocaust, those awful stories about the mothers who are hiding in the attics or in the cellars or behind the china closet with the babies? And when the Germans would come in, they would try to stifle the babies so that the babies wouldn't cry and give away their hiding place. And there were so many stories of mothers who, in an effort to muffle their babies, ended up suffocating their babies. Well, the Egyptians used to come hunting for babies with their own babies. And when they made their babies cry, usually when a baby hears another baby cry, the baby that was in hiding would also cry. And that's how they found many of the babies. This was the time that Miriam lived in. She was born into this time. What do you think it was like for a child to live in a time like this? It was in this climate that Amram, Miriam's father, Yocheved's wife, made a decision. He was the leader of the Jewish people at the time, and he gathered together all the men, and he said, listen, they're killing out all of our boys that are born. What sense does it make for us to keep having babies? So I am going to divorce my wife so that I don't keep having babies that are going to be killed. And everybody followed suit. The way they describe the scene is that people who were passing by the city of Goshen, they heard this wailing, this siren. They didn't know what it was. And as they got closer and closer to the city of Goshen, they realized that it was the sound of all the women crying, begging, screaming for their husbands not to divorce them. When Miriam hears this, she approaches her father. And Miriam knew what her father needed to hear because she had wisdom beyond her years. How long does it take adults to realize sometimes that when we need to convince somebody to do the right thing, we need to not say what we want to say, even if it's correct. We need to say what they need to hear in order to do the right thing. And this is what Miriam said to her father. Daddy, Paro decreed on the boys, so there won't be any boys, but because of you, there also won't be any Jewish girls. Not only that, Daddy, but it's possible that even with Paro's edict, some people will be able to successfully hide their baby boys. Because of you, there'll be 0 boys, none to be saved. And Daddy, maybe most importantly, I had a prophecy, I had a vision that Mommy is going to have a baby boy and he is going to be the savior of the Jews. So please, Daddy, don't give up on the Jewish people. And she spoke to his heart, and he realized that she was right. And so he decided he was going to remarry his wife, Yocheved. And Miriam said, no, Daddy, not a private ceremony. You need to do this. It's a big wedding in the public square for everybody to see, so that everyone will take back their wives. And sure enough, they had a big, beautiful wedding in the public square. And the Medrash describes to us that little Miriam was dancing in front of her father, the groom, and her mother, the bride, together with her little brother, Aharon. Unfortunately, over there in the corner was an Egyptian hiding behind the building and marking down, Jewish wedding on this date. Let's calculate 9 months from now, because there might be a baby and we'll be able to come and get that baby. And 6 months pass, and Yocheved gives birth prematurely to a little boy named Moses. And things are actually wonderful, because when he is born, a bright light appears in the house. The house is lit up because of him. And they realize that Miriam was right. And it says in the Medrash that Amram, her father, came and kissed little Miriam on the head and said, your prophecy came true. Thank you for not letting us give up on the Jewish people. And they raised this child for 3 months until it was 9 months after the wedding. And now the Egyptians came because it was recorded. And they knocked on the door. And that's okay, because they hid the baby initially. But then they came back, and they came back. And at some point they realized that they could not hide this baby anymore. And they had no choice. They had to take this baby. Yocheved, the mother, made a basket, and they placed the baby in the basket, and they set the baby adrift in the water amongst the reeds. And at this point, Amram, Miriam's father, slaps her on the head and says to her, what happened to your prophecy? What is Miriam thinking at this point? Well, Miriam actually goes down to the water, and she stands there by the water watching the baby. What could she be thinking? She could certainly be thinking, oh no, I mean, how could this possibly turn out good? I mean, this baby is either going to drown or this baby is going to starve out there by the reeds. But that's not what Miriam was thinking. Miriam stood by the water. And if you read the words of the Torah that explain to us so much, there are 2 ways that you can say somebody stood. You can say la'amod, that also means to stand. But there's actually another way. And the word that is used here to say that Miriam stood by the water is vatesatsav. That she stood, but she stood strong. You know, sometimes you can just stand, and sometimes you can stand strong. She stood strong with faith. She knew. It wasn't a question whether or not God was going to save this baby. She knew that God would. She had faith, complete faith, even when it seemed like there was absolutely no way out. For her, it was just to stand by and to watch how God, I don't know how. I don't need to know. I don't need to know how. I'm going to stand strong, and I'm going to wait and see. I'm going to leave this in God's hands, because God can do anything, even when there's no hope. Have you ever been in a situation where it seemed like there was no hope, where there was no option? It's those difficult times that how we react really tells so much about what kind of people we are. We don't get to control our circumstances, but we always can control our reaction to difficult circumstances. Just the other day, I found myself in a very difficult situation. I was on my way to visit my children, and we had packed up, and it was evening, and my husband was already waiting outside in the car for me. And I realized that I had not left money on the counter for the woman who helps me clean the house, who was coming the next day. So I ran upstairs to my sock drawer, where I keep a sock with thousands of dollars of cash. And every single week I would go to that drawer and take out some money, and that's how I'd pay this lady that cleans my house. And I go upstairs and I open up my drawer, and it's empty. And for a moment I just stand there shocked, and I say, oh right, it's empty because today's Wednesday night, and on Sunday we got some new furniture in my bedroom, and we decided to rearrange things. And I actually went through all of my old drawers and things that I no longer needed, I hadn't worn in 20 years. I decided I had this big garbage bag, and I was throwing things out. And I remembered when I came across some socks that didn't have any matches, I said, well, what do I need that for? And I actually threw them in the garbage, which means that I threw out the sock that contained thousands of dollars in the garbage. And I specifically remember that I went downstairs on Sunday night with this big bag of garbage, and my husband said, oh, you know what? That's a big bag of garbage. No reason to leave it in the house. The garbage people come on Monday morning to collect the garbage. I'm bringing this out right now. I'm going to put it out by the curb so they can take it away. And this is Wednesday night. And I sat there on the floor thinking, I can't believe this. Thousands of dollars. I should really be upset. And for some reason, most probably because the night before I had just gone to another Project Inspire program, which was about happiness, where they specifically talked about the fact that we can't control the circumstances, but we can always control our reaction. We can choose to be happy even in difficult situations. We can't change what happened anyway. And I felt this calmness, and I just said, okay, you know what? I'm really upset. I should be upset, but I can't control this. The fact, the money's gone, but I can't control my attitude. And I'm not going to get angry. I'm not going to get upset. I'm just going to accept that for some reason, this is what God wanted to happen. So be it. It was never my money to begin with. It was a gift from God when I got it originally, right? So everything we have is a gift from God. And God decided that I shouldn't have this money now. But I did need to go downstairs and tell my husband. And I remember issuing a little thanks to God for having the most incredible husband that I knew wouldn't get angry at me. And I went downstairs and I got into the car next to him. And I said, before we go, I just want to say something. I've said, not such great news. You know, on Sunday when I was cleaning out my drawers and I was throwing things out that we didn't need, and it seems that I threw out the sack with the money. I don't know what I was thinking. I just wasn't thinking, and it went into the garbage as a single sock. And I just want to confirm, you said you were taking out the garbage and putting it by the curb on Sunday night. You did, didn't you? And my husband said, yes, I definitely did. I put it out by the curb. And we sat there in the car for a few minutes, just understanding, okay, so the money's gone. And we were sad. That's okay, a little bit sad inside, but we decided we're not going to let this get us down. And all of a sudden I turned, we were sitting outside, and I looked, and I saw there were a lot of bags of garbage. Well, that made sense, actually, because tomorrow's Thursday morning, and my husband would have again put out the garbage in front. And I said, oh, so those bags are from, the new garbage. And he said, yeah. And then all of a sudden his face lit up, and he said, Monday afternoon, I remember being so upset. They didn't collect our garbage. They skipped our house. They did collect garbage, but for some reason on Monday morning, they did not collect our garbage. Sure enough, we jumped out of the car. We went to the garbage bag by the garbage. We opened it up, and there was the sock with the money. Because God can do anything. For Miriam, the question was not, would this baby be saved? It was, I'm going to watch and see how God will save, because faith means that even when there is no way out, there are only two doors. The answer is there's always a third door. There's always the possibility of a third door, because God can do anything. But really, how could he possibly save this baby? Who is the worst person that could possibly come down now to the river to bathe? Okay, you're going to say Paro. Who's the second worst person, as Rabbi David Foreman asks, from whom I learned a lot of this material? Paro's daughter? Well, that's who comes down, of course. And she sees the baby and she reaches out and she gets the baby and she decides that she's going to raise this baby. And Miriam is standing there, standing strong and watching this unfold. And it says that in the Medrash that she took this baby to an Egyptian nursemaid, but the baby Moshe would not nurse from an Egyptian nursemaid. And this point, the chutzpah, the gall, the nerve, the faith, the audacity of Miriam, she walks as a young child right up to this daughter of Paro and she says, I see you're having a problem. The baby's not going to nurse from a non-Jewish, because she realized that Paro's daughter wasn't dumb. She must realize this must be a Jewish baby. Who else is leaving a baby in a basket by the water, right? Maybe you need a Jewish nursemaid, because I happen to know one who might be available for you. Really? Could you get her? So Miriam runs home and she brings Yocheved. And Yocheved, just imagine the scene. Yocheved is standing there in front of the daughter of Paro. And the daughter of Paro says to her, here's the deal. I have this baby and I'd like for you to nurse this baby for 2 years. And I'm going to pay you well for that. But there's a caveat. I can't give you the job unless you can promise one thing. I need you to promise that you're going to love this baby like your own. And Yocheved says, love this baby like my own. Yes, I'm pretty sure that I can do that. Yesterday, or this morning, Yocheved had given up this baby and given up hope. It looked like there was no way out to save this baby. And now she's taking this baby home and she's going to nurse this baby for 2 years. And even after that, for the next 20 years, Moshe grows up in the palace. What do you think Miriam is thinking now? Well, things are looking good, right? There's a prophecy that there's going to be a boy born to Yocheved that's going to lead the Jews out of Egypt and save them. And now he's growing up in the palace. He's really in a good position to do this. Things look good for the prophecy, right? Until he turns 20. And he decides to go out and see what's going on. And he sees the suffering. And it says that he even starts to help the Jews who are working. And then he notices one day that there is an Egyptian that is beating a Jewish person. What's the story? Well, it seems that Dasan, the Jewish person, in the morning was not home, and the Egyptian taskmaster came to his house to get him, to bring him to work. But since Dasan wasn't home, only his wife was home, the taskmaster took advantage of his wife. And when Dasan came in, the taskmaster was upset at him and started to beat him. And Moshe walks on the scene and he kills this Egyptian. And he saves Dasan. The next day, Moshe comes outside and he sees 2 Jews arguing. One of them is Dasan and the other one is Aviram. Aviram was the brother-in-law. He was the brother of Dasan's wife. And this is what Moshe overhears. He overhears Dasan saying, she's defiled, I will have nothing to do with her. And Aviram, her brother, is saying, no, Dasan, don't you understand? It wasn't her fault. The Egyptian forced her. And Moshe says, please, you're Jewish people, don't fight with each other. Don't you have enough enemies with the Egyptians? Jews shouldn't fight amongst each other. And Dasan and Aviram turned to Moshe and said, excuse me? Who are you to butt in? Do you think that we don't know who you are, you high and mighty prince? We know that you're really Jewish. And you know what? I think we can get quite a bit of money if we tell Paro that you're really Jewish and that you killed an Egyptian yesterday. And sure enough, Moshe is brought on trial and he has to hightail it out of Egypt and he escapes. He escapes and he's gone for 60 years. 60 years go by. Think about it. The Holocaust lasted for over 5 years. The Egyptians are making the Jewish people suffer. They are slaves. They are being tortured. 5 years. 10 years pass. Where's Moshe? What's Miriam thinking? What's everyone else thinking? They don't have WhatsApp. They can't keep in touch with him. Is he even still alive? 15 years. 20 years. If Amram, Miriam's father, hit her on the head on that day when they hit him in the basket, what do you think Amram is thinking now? 25 years. And things keep getting worse for the Jews. We're told so many things in the Midrash. We're told that Paro had leprosy. And his advisors said the only way to cure your leprosy is if you bathe in the blood of babies. Which babies are we going to kill? Yep, you got it, the Jewish babies. So every day Jewish babies were killed so that Paro could bathe in their blood. 30 years, 35 years, more edicts. They started burning babies alive. 40 years, 45 years. Here's another edict. When the Jews didn't meet their quota, what they would do is for bricks that they had to make, they would take the babies and they would put the babies into the wall instead of a brick. So whereas before you had no choice, right? You had to meet your quota, you got beaten, the babies were being taken randomly whenever they were found. Now, if I didn't work hard enough and I didn't make my quota, then your baby was taken. Imagine the guilt that they felt. And during this time, what do you think people were thinking? Well, what's Miriam thinking? You know what? I'm going to tell you what everyone else was thinking, and then we'll discuss what Miriam was thinking. The men during this time, they had grown totally despondent. They were tired. There was no end in sight to the suffering. I mean, maybe when Moshe, when he was growing up in the palace, we had an ace in the hole. There was something to hope for. There was something to hold on to. But now he's gone. It's been 60 years. There is no hope. And so they separated from their wives. They didn't divorce them, but they separated from their wives. Why would I want to bring a baby into this kind of a world? If it were up to the men, the Jews would have ceased to exist. Do you know who didn't give up? During this time, it's the women who didn't give up. It was the women who did not let their husbands give up. They didn't let their children give up. They didn't give up on the family, and they didn't give up on having a family. So what did they do? They took these pieces of copper, and they would rub them until they would shine like a mirror. And they went out fishing, and they caught some fish, and they packed a beautiful picnic basket, and they went out into the fields with these copper mirrors and their picnic basket, and they met the husbands who were working in the field during their breaks, and they would have a nice picnic lunch with them. And they would hold up the copper mirrors, and they would say, "Look how beautiful I am." They even, it says, they took from the reeds and they made makeup for themselves to make themselves look beautiful. "Aren't I so beautiful? Oh, look at you. Who's more beautiful, me or you?" And they flirted with their husbands, and they inspired their husbands. Where did they get the strength? Who inspired them to do this? I mean, the women, they were certainly suffering as well. It was Miriam. During those 60 years that Moshe was gone, Miriam became the leader of the Jewish people. She would meet with the women. She would listen to them. She would cry with them. And she would inspire them. And she taught them how to inspire their husbands. Not by lecturing and saying, "This is the wrong thing, how can you do this?" No. Take the mirrors. Go out to the fields. Breathe life into your husbands. Breathe faith. Breathe hope into them. Who took us out of Egypt? Who let us out? Well, of course we know it's Moshe, it's Moses. Who made sure that there were still Jews to take out? Who actually saved the Jewish people in Egypt? Miriam. Steadfast in her belief in Hashem, in God, and in good, she led the women. She taught them, and she inspired them to never give up. And then they inspired their families. On the day that Moses was leading the Jews out of Egypt, and they came up to that wall of water, to that, what are we going to do now? We're stuck. So we're told that the people divided into 4 different groups. A quarter of the people said, "Let's just commit suicide. I mean, there is no hope. There's no choice." And a quarter of the people said, "We're going to turn around and we're going to fight." As if they could fight against the Egyptian army, right? They were slaves. A quarter of the people said, "Let's just turn around and go back, and we'll just go back and be slaves." And a quarter of the people said, "Let's just pray." And Moses calls out to these people, and he says, "Stop!" And he invoked Miriam's strength. there was once a young girl who stood by the water in an impossible situation. There was a baby that could not possibly be saved. And yet, she stood strong and had faith and believed and didn't give up. What are Moshe's words? What were his words to the Jewish people at this time? How did he invoke Miriam's memory? What did he say? He said, like Miriam, it said, Vatesat Zav, that Miriam stood strong. So he turns to the Jewish people and he says, Hisyatzvu u'ru'u es Yeshuas Hashem. Stand strong and you will see the salvation of Hashem. Because we are reliving the impossible scenario by the water, reliving that same thing. It's not possible to be saved as we stand by the water, and yet stand strong with your faith and watch, just like Miriam did. Don't give up, even though there's no logical way that you can think of that we can possibly be saved. You need to always entertain the possibility that there's a fifth door or a sixth door, because God can do anything. And at that moment, the prophecy of Miriam came true as a result of them having the faith that she had on that day. I don't know how many of you have seen the Ten Commandments, and if you think that Moses took his staff and then the water split, that's not actually what happened. Instead, when Moses told the people, stand strong and watch, Moshe told the people, go. God said to Moses, don't call out to me. Matatake light. Now's not the time to just call out. You need to have faith and you need to go. Take the first step. And that's what Nachshon ben Aminadav did. He took that first, even though the water had not yet split, he started walking into the water. And as he walked into the water, it split. And as he took the next step, it split more. And each person had to have that faith. And that's what we have to do sometimes in life. Even when it doesn't seem possible, even when we're walking into the water, we think we're going to drown. God can do anything. Have faith. And so, the Jews were saved. And they got to the other side. And the Egyptians went in and the water closed around them and they drowned. And now, Miriam sings. Why does she need to sing her own song? She sings because they were saved through what she taught them by example. And now we understand the entire verse, right? Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aharon, took the tambourine. What is all of that? Well, go back and think about it. These words are specifically reminding us for all time about that little girl Miriam, who had a prophecy. Miriam Hanaviyah, Miriam the prophetess, at a time when she was Achos Aharon. She was not yet Moshe's sister because Moshe wasn't born yet, right? We're specifically remembering that story, that prophecy at the time when she was the sister of only Aharon. And what tambourine did she take? Well, during these difficult times, during all of these 60 years, when everything seemed lost, she was inspiring the women. She imbued the woman with hope for the sake of the family. She taught the women that they could make tambourines, and they should, because the day is coming soon when they're going to need them to sing and to dance when God is going to save us. So she had a tambourine specifically saved for that day that she knew was going to come, and she was going to sing and dance for God. And all the women had their specific tambourines because they had faith, because of Miriam, that there was one day going to be a day when they were going to need those tambourines. So whereas the song that was sung by all the Jewish people was a song of gratitude to God, to Hashem, Miriam's song celebrated the hope and the faith in God that she had as she stood by the water, that Moshe invoked as they stood by the water, as they stood strong and they went forward with faith. This was a song of faith and hope. How good of a leader and a role model was Miriam? Well, just a few months later, we know that Moses went up to get the Torah, and after 40 days, they calculated incorrectly, and he didn't come down exactly when they thought. And the men lost hope again, and they decided to have this golden calf, which the women did not participate in because they didn't lose faith. And sometime after that, when the men sent spies into Israel, you know who didn't believe the bad words about Israel when they came back? You know who had faith in God? It was the women. The men all died in the desert. They didn't make it into Israel because of that. The women are the ones who went into Israel. It was in Miriam's merit that they had this faith. And they survived 40 years in the desert. In the desert, there's usually no water. But there was the well, the Be'er of Miriam, the well of Miriam, that traveled with them through the desert to remind them of that little girl who stood by the water and never lost hope. And she had faith. And because of that, they were saved. How did she do it? How did she not lose faith? I mean, it was 60 years. I mean, when we're in a difficult situation that persists, we pray, and we cry, and we wait, and we wait. And sometimes we begin to lose hope. I just heard the story of a modern-day Miriam. She was a woman who was sick herself, and she heard about a boy who had gotten a diagnosis that he had a 20% chance of living 2 years. And he decided, well, what's the point? And he just dropped out of life. He stayed home. He wasn't going to school anymore. So this woman went to see him, and she went to speak to him, and she said, why aren't you going to school? And he said, I'm sorry, did you not hear? I've got a 20% chance of living more than 2 years. And she said, nonsense. You, like every other person in the world, have a 50% chance of living tomorrow and a 50% chance of dying tomorrow, because God decides every day who's going to live and who's going to die. And I really learned that lesson. It was about 36 years ago. And I was in Seattle, and my father-in-law had just had a bone marrow transplant, and he was not doing well, and he was in a coma, and he was dying. And it was a Friday night, and we sat in the waiting room in the hospital with the social worker. Her name was Debbie. She was a 29-year-old, lovely, lovely girl. And she said to us, don't lose hope. I know it seems like, there's really no hope. It seems like he's going to die very soon. But the reality is that none of us know. It's in God's hands. Anybody could die any day. And we went home that night. And when we came to the hospital the next morning, we heard that Debbie was hit by a bus and killed that night. And we learned that lesson. The reality is that none of us know. The next day, when this modern-day Miriam got a phone call from the mother told her, I don't understand. What did you say to my son? He decided he's going to live. He's going to school again. He's going to get on with his life. I need to know what you said. Was she able to change his reality? Was she able to improve his odds? No. You know what she said to him? She said to him, you can wait to die, or you can live while you are living. She inspired him not to lose hope, even in a desperate situation. There's a quote, the tragedy of life is not death, but what we let die inside of us while we live. And the truth of the matter is that none of us know how or how long we're going to live. But one thing that Miriam teaches us is to stand strong with faith, to be strong for others as well, and to never give up, even when the path that we're on seems difficult and unending. May we always have the strength to stand strong with our song of gratitude to God for all the good that He does give us each and every day, to take whatever bitter reality we may have, and like Miriam, to change the mar from her name, that root word of mar meaning bitter. Well, there's also a word called merim, which is to lift up. May we be able to take that bitter reality that sometimes we have, and like Miriam, change the mar, the bitter, into a mission of merim, of lifting other people up, like the water in the well rises, as we eagerly await the ultimate salvation in our day really soon. I have my tambourine ready. Do you?